back, everybody, to the Minecraft Short Stories podcast. In this episode today, we have a listener story by Daniel, and I'm finally over all my sicknesses, so I can actually read the story and can actually get back to making episodes and releasing episodes. So now that it's over, get back to making stuff. Anyways, this story's title is Block by Block, The Quest for the Blade of the Ancients. Not to be confused with episode like 30-something, which is The Quest for the Ancient Blade, which is a story I wrote. Thank you, Daniel, for submitting this. And the story was submitted through my website, minecraftshortstories.com, through the Submit a Story page. So if you have a story you'd like to submit, it has to be about Minecraft, of course, you can go to there, fill out the page, and it may get read on the show. There's a link for that inside the description. And then also there's some other links down there. Check out the Patreon and the YouTube and that stuff. Anyways, another thank you to Daniel for submitting this awesome story. And let's get right into it. Block by Block, The Quest for the Blade of the Ancients, by Daniel. Chapter 1, The Prophecy Unfolds. The village was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of a torch and the distant baaing of a sheep. Steve leaned against the wall of the library, studying the map Alex had found. Its corners were frayed, and its ink had faded with age. But one thing was clear. The X marked something important. Do you really think it exists? Alex asked, breaking the silence. She stood behind him, her iron sword glinting faintly in the torchlight. Her fiery determination was evident, as always. It has to, Steve replied, rolling up the map. The Blade of the Ancients is the only weapon strong enough to kill the Warden King. If the stories are true, it's buried deep beneath the mountains of the Frostbite Peaks. Alex crossed her arms, glancing toward the horizon. That's weeks of travel, and even if we get there, we'll have to deal with whatever's guarding it. Steve grinned. Since when have we ever let a little danger stop us? She smirked back. Fair point. The Warden King, a legend shrouded in fear, had risen from the deep dark. His minions had begun terrorizing villages, dragging unsuspecting people into the depths. The villagers whispered of a growing army beneath the Overworld, and no one had the courage to venture near the ancient cities anymore. Except Steve and Alex. They packed their supplies, food, weapons, and tools, and set out as the first rays of dawn painted the sky. The journey would be long and treacherous, but their resolve was firm. The fate of the Overworld depended on them. Chapter 2, Into the Wild. The first few days of travel were uneventful. They crossed sprawling plains dotted with wildflowers, dense forests where the sunlight barely reached the ground, and winding rivers teeming with fish. At night, they set up camp, taking turns to keep watch as zombies and skeletons prowled the darkness. On the fifth day, they encountered their first real challenge. The jungle loomed ahead, its towering trees and tangled vines forming a near impenetrable wall. Somewhere within lay a ruined temple, marked as their first destination on the map. The legend claimed that the temple held a key, a shard of ancient crystal needed to unlock the blade's resting place. This place gives me the creeps, Alex muttered, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword as they stepped into the dense undergrowth. Stay close, Steve said, his eyes scanning the shadows. The air was thick and humid, buzzing with the sounds of insects. Parrots squawked from the treetops, and occasionally the distant roar of a jaguar broke through the eerie stillness. As they ventured deeper, the jungle seemed to close in around them, the light growing dimmer. Finally, they spotted the temple, a moss-covered structure of stone and cracked bricks, half swallowed by the jungle. Vines draped its walls like curtains, and the entrance yawned open like the mouth of some great beast. You sure about this? Alex asked, peering into the darkness. Not at all, Steve replied with a grin. Let's go. Inside, the air was cool and damp. The faint sound of dripping water echoed through the corridors. They moved cautiously, their torches casting flickering shadows on the walls. It wasn't too long before they triggered the first trap. A click sounded beneath Alex's foot, and the walls sprang to life, shooting arrows from hidden dispensers. She ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the deadly projectiles. Watch your step, she shouted, leaping onto a nearby block. Steve pulled out his shield, using it to deflect the arrows as they moved forward. The traps grew more devious. Pressure plates that released poison darts, tripwires that unleashed cascades of gravel, and even a pit of lava concealed beneath a flimsy stone slab. At last, they reached the central chamber. A pedestal stood in the middle, bathed in the faint glow of sunlight filtering through a crack in the ceiling. On it rested a crystal shard, shimmering with a strange, otherworldly light. "That's it," Steve whispered. As Alex reached for the shard, the ground trembled. The pedestal sank into the floor, and the walls began to shake. From the shadows emerged a massive figure, a golem made of mossy stone, its eyes glowing with an unnatural green light. "Of course it couldn't be easy," Alex muttered, drawing her sword. The golem roared, swinging a massive arm towards them. Steve rolled out of the way, drawing his bow and firing arrows at its glowing eyes. The arrows bounced harmlessly off its thick stone skin. "Go for the joints," he shouted, dodging another blow. Alex sprinted around the golem, slashing at its legs. Her sword chipped away at the stone, and the golem let out a bellow of rage, its movement slowing. "Keep it distracted," Steve called, pulling a bucket of water from his inventory. He poured it on the ground, creating a makeshift waterfall that flowed into the golem's exposed cracks. The creature froze for a moment, its body stiffening as the water seeped in. Alex seized the opportunity, delivering a final blow to its head. The golem collapsed into a heap of rubble, and the chamber grew still. "Nice work," Steve said, catching his breath. Alex grinned. "You too. Now let's grab that shard and get out of here." The crystal shard safely in hand, they exited the temple and continued their journey. The frostbite peaks awaited, and with it, the blade of the ancients. But the dangers they faced so far were nothing compared to what lay ahead. Chapter 3: Frostbitten Foes. Frostbite peaks loomed in the distance, their icy spires cutting into the sky like jagged teeth. Steve and Alex stood at the edge of the frozen tundra, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The wind howled, carrying with it a promise of danger. "Why is it always the cold places?" Alex grumbled, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "Better than the Nether," Steve replied with a chuckle. The map's ink had almost completely faded from exposure to the harsh elements, but Steve had memorized the next clue. The blade rested within an ancient vault, deep inside the heart of the peaks. To open the vault, they needed to collect 3 shards like the one they'd retrieved from the jungle temple. Their journey across the tundra was slow and perilous. The ice beneath their boots cracked ominously, and the occasional polar bear lumbered by, eyeing them warily. As night fell, the temperature plummeted further, and hostile mobs began to emerge from snow-covered terrain. "Skeletons on the ridge!" Alex shouted, drawing her bow. Steve spun around, pulling out his shield just as an arrow whizzed past his head. A group of skeletons clad in icy armor advanced towards them, their glowing blue eyes gleaming in the darkness. "These aren't ordinary skeletons," Steve yelled, blocking another arrow. "They're strays," Alex replied, loosing an arrow and striking one in the chest. The skeleton stumbled, but didn't fall. Steve pulled out his axe, charging at the nearest stray, shattering its ribcage with a powerful swing. The others turned their attentions towards him, giving Alex time to pick them off from a distance. As the last skeleton fell, the snow around them began to tremble. Steve?" Alex said, her voice tinged with worry. The ground cracked and gave way beneath them, sending them tumbling into an icy cavern. They landed hard on a pile of snow, groaning as they picked themselves up. "That was unexpected," Steve muttered, shaking frost from his hair. Alex lit a torch, illuminating the cavern. Stalactites of ice hung from the ceiling, and frozen waterfalls lined the walls. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, much like the one in the jungle temple. "Another shard," Alex said, stepping forward cautiously. "Wait," Steve said, holding out a hand. "This is too easy." As if on cue, the cavern shook again. The ice beneath the pedestal shattered, and a massive creature emerged, a frost elemental, its body made entirely of jagged ice. Its roar echoed through the chamber, and its eyes locked onto the intruders. "Why do I always call these things?" Steve groaned, drawing his sword. Chapter 4: The Frost Elemental. The Frost Elemental swung its colossal arm, sending a wave of icy shards flying towards them. Steve raised his shield, deflecting the shards, while Alex dodged to the side, her sword glinting in the torchlight. "We need to melt it down," Alex shouted, hurling a potion of fire resistance at the creature. The potion splashed against the frost elemental, causing steam to rise where it hit. It roared in pain, its icy form cracking slightly. "Keep it up," Steve yelled, pulling out a flint and steel. He lit a bundle of logs from his inventory, creating a makeshift fire. The warmth spread quickly, weakening the elemental further. But the creature wasn't finished. It slammed its fists into the ground, creating icy spikes that erupted from the floor. One caught Alex off guard, knocking her back. "Alex!" Steve shouted, rushing to her side. "I'm fine," she grunted, pushing herself up. "Just keep it distracted." Steve charged at the elemental, slashing at its legs. The creature stumbled, its massive frame struggling to stay upright. Alex, recovering quickly, drew her bow and fired an arrow tipped with flame. The arrow struck the frost elemental in the chest and let out a final, earth-shaking roar before collapsing into a pile of melting ice. The chamber grew silent, save for the sound of dripping water. "That was intense," Steve said, panting. Alex nodded, brushing frost from her armor. "Let's grab the shard and get out of here before something else shows up." Steve approached the pedestal where the second shard now glowed faintly. He carefully placed it into his inventory alongside the first. "Two down, one to go," he said. As they climbed out of the cavern and resumed their journey, the frostbite peaks stretched ever higher ahead of them. The final shard awaited them within the ruins of a long-lost fortress at the summit. But the Warden King's minions were close behind, and time was running out. Chapter 5. The Final Shard. The climb to the summit of the frostbite peaks was grueling. The air grew thinner with every step, and the biting wind threatened to throw Steve and Alex off the narrow, icy ledges. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the final shard, and their only hope against the Warden King, awaited them. The ruins of the fortress came into view as they neared the top, a jagged silhouette against the pale sky. It was ancient, its stone walls cracked and weathered by time. A strange, unnatural hum filled the air, sending a chill down their spines. "That's not just the wind," Alex muttered, gripping her sword tightly. "Stay sharp," Steve said. "We don't know what's waiting for us up there." They entered the fortress through a crumbling archway, their torches casting long shadows on the cold stone. The interior was eerily silent, save for the faint hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. As they moved deeper into the ruins, they found the source of the noise, a glowing altar in the center of the main chamber. Floating above it was the final shard, spinning slowly in midair. "There it is," Alex whispered. "And there's the catch," Steve said, pointing to the floor. The stone slabs surrounding the altar were etched with glowing runes. As Alex stepped closer, the runes flared to life, and a low rumble filled the chamber. The walls split open, revealing rows of pillagers clad in dark robes, their crossbows aimed and ready. At their center stood an evoker, his piercing green eyes locking onto Steve's and Alex's. "Intruders," the evoker hissed, raising his hands. "You will not take what is ours." Chapter 6. The Battle of the Shard. The pillagers attacked in unison, their arrows raining down on Steve and Alex. Steve raised his shield, deflecting the projectiles as Alex loosed her own arrows with deadly precision. "Take out the evoker," Steve shouted. Alex nodded, weaving through the chaos as the evoker summoned a swarm of X's. The tiny, ghostly creatures darted towards her, their glowing swords slashing through the air. She swung her sword, scattering them with quick, precise strikes. Meanwhile, Steve charged at the pillagers, his axe cleaving through their ranks. Spotted a ravager bursting through a sidewall, its massive frame barreling towards him. "Oh, come on," Steve yelled, diving out of the way as the beast crashed into a pillar. He scrambled to his feet and pulled out a block of TNT. "Alex, cover me." He fired at the ravager, drawing its attention as Steve lit the TNT and shoved it towards the beast. The explosion rocked the chamber, sending chunks of stone flying and taking the ravager down with it. "Nice one," Alex called, slicing through the last of the Vexes. The evoker, now cornered, snarled and raised his hands again. "You cannot stop the Warden King. Who will rise and this world will fall." Alex didn't give him a chance to finish. Her arrow struck true, silencing him. The remaining pillagers fled, and the chamber fell silent once more. Steve approached the altar, the final shard now within reach. He hesitated for a moment and grabbed it. The shards pulsed in his inventory, their energy resonating with a strange, harmonious hum. "We have all three," Alex said, her voice tinged with relief. "Now what?" Steve pulled out the map, which had changed the moment he took the shard. New markings had appeared, pointing to a location deep beneath the ground. The Warden King's lair. "Now," Steve said, "we finish this." Chapter 7. Descent into Darkness. The entrance to the deep dark was hidden within a jagged canyon at the edge of the mountains. Steve and Alex descended carefully, the torches barely illuminating the pitch-black surroundings. The air grew heavy, and the oppressive silence was broken only by their footsteps. As they ventured deeper, they spotted the first signs of the ancient city, massive weathered columns and glowing skulk veins that pulsed faintly in the dark. "Place is worse than I had imagined," Alex said, her voice barely a whisper. "Be quiet," Steve warned. "We make too much noise." A distant roar cut him off, sending a shiver down their spines. "Right," Alex said, gripping her sword tightly. "No noise." They moved cautiously, avoiding skulk sensors and shriekers as they navigated the labyrinthine ruins. At the heart of the city, they found it. The Warden King's throne room. The massive creature sat atop a throne carved from skulk and stone, his glowing chest pulsing like a heartbeat. His eyes, or the void where they should have been, turned towards them as they entered. "You dare challenge me?" the Warden King rumbled, his voice a deep, guttural growl. Steve drew the shards from his inventory, and they fused together in a burst of light, forming the Blade of the Ancients. The sword glowed with a golden radiance, its edges humming with power. "Yeah," Steve said, stepping forward. "We dare." Chapter 8. The Final Battle. The Warden King roared, shaking the cavern as he rose to his full height. The ground trembled with each step he took, and the room was soon filled with skulk minions crawling from the walls. Steve and Alex fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized. Alex kept the minions at bay with her bow, while Steve focused on the Warden King, the Blade of Ancients cutting through the darkness like a beacon. The Warden King unleashed waves of sonic attacks, forcing them to dodge and weave. His strength was overwhelming, but the blade seemed to weaken him with every strike, its golden light piercing through his corrupted form. "We can do this," Alex shouted, firing a flaming arrow into the Warden King's chest. Steve saw his chance. As the Warden King stumbled, he leapt onto the throne and drove the Blade of the Ancients into the creature's heart. The Warden King let out a deafening roar, and the entire city began to collapse. "Time to go," Steve yelled, grabbing Alex's hand as they sprinted towards the exit. Epilogue. A New Dawn. The sun was rising as Steve and Alex emerged from the canyon, the first rays of light washing over the land. "We did it," Alex said, her voice filled with awe. Steve held up the Blade of the Ancients, its glow fading as the last of its power was spent. "The Warden King is gone. Overworld is safe. For now." They looked at each other and smiled. The adventure was over, but in a world like theirs, another was always just a block away. The end. Thank you guys so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Daniel, for submitting this. It was an awesome read. Also, if you're on Patreon, the part 3 for the Hidden Stories series will be releasing soon. I am so close to finishing it. But like I said, sickness has gone the way of a lot of writing and recording for this podcast, so I'll have to catch up a little bit. So look out for that very soon, and look out for more Patreon posts now that I'm not sick. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys inside the next episode.